Dying is easy, he thought, feeling the air freeze in his lungs, but the village is not. Ice cracked beneath his feet as hungry eyes, hundreds of them, gleamed in the Arctic darkness. The primal howl of 800 wolves echoed through the icy mountains of Yakutia, a chorus of death closing in on him and the village's last reindeer herd. The temperature plummeted to 70 degrees, and every breath was agony. Boril, the elder hunter, gripped his spear, his old body trembling not just from the cold, but from an ancestral fury, knowing that everyone's life depended on that insane act. And what he would do next would be etched forever in snow and time. Boril felt the cold burn his nostrils, but the fire in his chest was a determination fiercer than any winter. The wolves' eyes, like shimmering embers in the deepest darkness, formed an impenetrable semicircle. Every breath was a challenge, every muscle in his ancient body cried out for rest, but the image of the gaunt faces in Borovoy, of children huddled against the cold and hunger, was a fire that drove him. He was not just Boril, the hunter. He was the living memory of generations of Yakuts who had faced even crueler winters, whispering secrets of survival on the icy wind. With a slow, deliberate movement, Boril raised his spear, not in a gesture of attack, but like a ceremonial staff. His eyes, accustomed to the white vastness, swept over the pack, searching for the leader, the dominant spirit commanding that hungry horde. He knew brute force would be useless. His weapon was his mind, his knowledge of the terrain, and his ancestral connection to the wild itself. The howls ceased for an instant, replaced by a low, collective growl, a vibration Boril felt in his bones. The wolves were confused, expecting an attack, but he would not attack. Instead, Boril took a step back, a single step, moving slightly away from the reindeer herd that huddled, trembling, behind him. The reindeer, with their large, frightened eyes, seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, their ragged breaths forming small clouds in the icy air. Boril knew he needed to create a distraction, an irresistible lure that would draw them away from their primary target. He remembered the stories told around the campfire, the tricks of the ancients, the way the forest spirits guided hunters. He then began to chant a low song, almost a lament, that seemed to emerge from the depths of the frozen earth. They were not words, but guttural, rhythmic sounds that vibrated in the air. It was a song of defiance, of recognition, a language that the wolves, in their most primitive instinct, might understand. The pack hesitated. Some wolves tilted their heads, others took a step back, their eyes fixed on the elder who dared not flee, not fight in a conventional way. Boril continued to sing, moving slowly, not towards the wolves, but to the side in the opposite direction of the village, eastward, where the treacherous and deadly Lena River glaciers awaited. He knew that every step was an invitation to death, but also a promise of life for his people. The cold was a heavy veil, but hope was a flickering flame in his heart. He felt the gaze of every wolf on his back, the palpable tension in the air, with every calculated movement. Gradually, curiosity and hunger began to overcome the predator's caution. A larger wolf, with darker fur and scars from ancient battles, stepped forward, followed by others. They were not attacking, but following, as if Boril's ancestral melody was hypnotizing them, drawing them into a dangerous game. The elder felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from a chilling adrenaline. The plan was beginning. He was the bait, the human lure, and the Lena River was the trap. With every step, the weight of the village rested on his shoulders, but also the strength of all his ancestors. He would not fail, ever. Boril felt the ice creak beneath his boots, a constant warning. The pack, now bolder, kept a dangerous distance, their yellow eyes reflecting the pale light of the Arctic moon. He felt their warm, hungry breath in the icy air, an overwhelming presence. Every muscle protested, but the mental image of the hopeful faces in Borovoy, especially those of his granddaughter Anya with her bright eyes, was a balm for the pain. He wasn't running. He was carrying the hope of a people. The guttural chant he maintained was a thin but persistent thread that guided them, an ancestral melody of respect and defiance. The landscape changed. Snow-covered hills gave way to steep rock formations and gradually to vast expanses of ice. The wind, once a lament, now howled with ferocity, lashing Borrell's face with cutting ice crystals. He knew he was approaching the Lena, the great river transformed into a deadly trap. The glaciers were treacherous, with hidden crevices, thin ice bridges, and labyrinths of frozen blocks that could disorient even the most experienced hunter. He needed to be more cunning than hunger. His plan was not just to lead them onto the ice, but to use it against them. Ancestral wisdom, passed down in whispers, spoke of how nature, in its fury, could be an ally or an enemy. Borrell remembered his grandfather, who had taught him to read the ice, to feel its vibrations, to predict its cracks. He closed his eyes for an instant, concentrating, feeling the earth, the ice, the wind. The village depended not on his strength, but on his mind, on every memory, every lesson. Finally, the imposing silhouette of the Lena River emerged, a white and bluish mass stretching infinitely. The air there was even more rarefied, biting. Borrell slowed his pace, not from exhaustion, but to calculate each step. The wolves, sensing the change, increased the pressure, growling louder, some daring to approach. He saw the mist of their breaths, felt the urgency of the imminent attack. It was time to act. With a swift movement, Borrell veered to the right, towards an area where the ice seemed more irregular. He knew that there, beneath the smooth surface, were underground currents that weakened the ice, creating invisible traps. His chant changed, becoming sharper, more provocative, like a wounded bird attracting a predator. The wolves, driven by hunger and the eagerness to capture their prey, followed without hesitation. Borrell leapt over a narrow, barely visible crevice, which he knew widened just below. He heard the sound of paws slipping, howls of frustration, as some heavier wolves felt the ice give way slightly. The pack, accustomed to hunting on firm ground, was disoriented. The ice was an unknown enemy, a treacherous battlefield. Borrell watched the pack leader, now confused, its growl losing authority. The strategy worked. He fought not with strength, but with the environment, with the intelligence that life in Yakutia had carved into his soul. The cold bit at him. Exhaustion was a constant weight, but the flame in his chest burned stronger. The village, his ancestors, Anya's future, everything drove him. He was the rock against the tide of wolves, the silent guardian of Borovoy. He would not yield. The first crucial step had been taken, and the Lena ice was beginning to do its work. The Lena ice, a labyrinth of crystal and danger, began to reveal its true intentions. Borrell, with the experience of one who had read 1,000 winters, felt every vibration beneath his feet, every whisper of the wind that shaped the invisible traps. He no longer ran. He danced with death, a slow, calculated ballet across the treacherous surface. The wolves, in turn, were increasingly disoriented. Their instincts, honed for hunting on solid ground, failed miserably on that slippery and unpredictable terrain. The collective growl that had once been a cohesive threat now fragmented into howls of frustration and confusion. Borrell watched the pack with keen eyes. He saw the younger ones slipping and falling, the older ones hesitating, their steps uncertain. Hunger still drove them, but the fear of the unknown began to erode their unity. He knew panic was a powerful ally. With a subtle movement of his body, Borrell steered towards an area where the ice rose in jagged formations, almost like the teeth of a sleeping giant. There, air currents created snow whirlwinds that obscured sight and sound, increasing the predator's disorientation. He needed more than just the terrain. He needed to break the pack's spirit. It was then that Boril invoked the ancestral cries, sounds his grandmother had taught him, mimicking the lament of a wounded wolf, the call of a lost pup, and finally, the territorial growl of a dominant predator. They were not cries of fury, but of cunning, designed to sow discord and confusion among the animals. The first sound, a sharp, painful howl, made several wolves stop, their ears twitching. They looked at each other, not understanding the origin of that sound, so familiar yet so out of place. The icy air swallowed his voice, but the intention was clear. Boril continued, alternating the sounds, as he moved with surprising agility for his age, leaping over small crevices and circling ice blocks. The pack, already fragmented by the terrain, was now divided by the sounds. Some wolves began to growl at their own companions, mistaking Boril's cries for those of rivals. The pack leader, the dark-furred wolf, seemed perplexed, its yellow eyes reflecting the growing disorder. It tried to regroup its followers with authoritative howls, but the harmony of the hunt was broken. Boril felt the cold penetrate his bones, every muscle aching, but the image of Anya's smile, of his small village, was a fire that kept him warm. He was not just an old man. He was an echo of all the hunters who came before him, a guardian of Borovoy. The plan was at its peak. The wolves, once a relentless horde, were now a confused and frustrated band of individuals, fighting more against the ice and each other than against the elder who was leading them into their own trap. The dispersion was beginning. The cacophony of disoriented growls and howls echoed through the glaciers, a sound that once heralded death, now a melody of victory for Boril. The fierce-eyed alpha wolf displayed anger and confusion. It tried to rally the pack, but few wolves responded. Many were trapped in crevices, slipping, or cornered by ice blocks. Boril's ancestral cries sowed chaos. The Lena River dismantled their predatory unity. Boril felt a spasm of pain in his left leg, an injury made cruel by the winter. Every step was a monumental effort, the icy air burning in his lungs. Yet the sight of the pack disintegrating, hope blossoming, was a powerful tonic. He could not yield. The village, the reindeer, Anya, all depended on his resilience. He was the last bastion between hunger and life. With renewed breath, Boril raised his spear, using it as a support, an extension of his will. He moved with renewed purpose, no longer luring wolves into traps, but moving away, clearing a path. His chant changed from provocative sounds to a soft murmur, a call he hoped the reindeer would sense. It was a call of safety, of return. The pack leader, sensing the change, let out a growl of frustration. It attempted one last charge, gathering the nearest wolves, but the ice was relentless. As it advanced, a deep crack, almost invisible beneath the thin snow, opened beneath its paws. It slipped, howling in surprise and rage, falling partially into a shallow crevice. It didn't trap it, but the humiliation and danger were a decisive blow to its authority. The wolves that followed hesitated, seeing their leader vulnerable. Fear, once the pack's tool, now turned against them. One by one, the predators began to retreat, some returning to solid ground, others dispersing in search of easier prey, far from the enigmatic elder and the treacherous terrain. The horde of 800 wolves, which had seemed invincible, was being broken by the wisdom and courage of a single man. Boril watched the rout, feeling relief and exhaustion. He had succeeded. Most of the pack was retreating, defeated not by brute force, but by intelligence and ancestral knowledge. His knees threatened to give way, but he forced himself to remain standing. The work was not yet done. He needed to ensure the reindeer were safe. Turning slowly, Boril began to retrace his steps, now westward, towards the village and the reindeer herd. The cold was still biting, but hope warmed his heart. He felt the warmth of the campfire, the smell of roasted meat, Anya's embrace. With every step, he left danger behind and approached the promise of life. His mission, audacious and suicidal, was accomplished. His body was wounded and exhausted, but his spirit, forged in the heart of the YAKUT winter, was stronger than ever. The village waited, and he, Boril, was returning, bringing salvation. The village waited, and he, Boril, was returning, bringing salvation. Every step was a battle against his body. The icy air penetrated his wounds, freezing his exhausted muscles. His left leg throbbed, a deep ache. He felt the weight of centuries of winters, the fatigue of a lifetime, but the sight of Borovoy's chimneys, still distant, was a beacon, a pulsating reminder of his defiance of death. In Borovoy, the wait was a silent torture. Inside the cabins, the fire crackled, but it did not ward off the cold of uncertainty. Women wove, men sharpened tools, but their eyes were fixed on the windows, waiting for a sign. Anya, Boril's 8-year-old granddaughter, hugged a reindeer doll. Her silence was heavier than any lament. She felt the tension in the air, the veiled fear. "He will return," she whispered. Irina, Anya's mother and Boril's daughter, felt her heart clench with every gust of wind. She knew her father's strength and wisdom, but also the cruelty of winter and the ferocity of 800 wolves. "He is like the Lena River, strong and unyielding," she tried to convince herself, stirring an empty pot. Food scarcity was a reality, and the absence of the reindeer would mean the end. The village lived in a limbo of hope and despair. A sharp cry cut through the icy air. It was Mikhail, the young sentinel. "He's coming back! Boril is coming back!" The news swept through the village. Doors flew open and villagers rushed out, their faces lit by relief and disbelief. The cold was forgotten. Hope, which seemed to have frozen, began to melt and warm everyone. Boril, staggering, could barely see through the snow, but he heard the shouts, the voices of his people. A faint smile appeared on his cracked lips. He was not alone. With a final effort, he dragged himself to the village entrance. His eyes met Anya's, who ran towards him, her little arms open. Irina was the first to reach him, holding him before he fell. "Father, you're hurt!" Her voice was a mix of relief and pain. Boril, leaning on her, raised a trembling hand, pointing eastward. "The reindeer! Safe. I guided them. Most of the wolves dispersed." His words, broken, were a balm for their anxious souls. The village erupted in applause and tears. Boril had not only driven away the wolves, he had driven away the spectre of hunger. The despair of Borovoy. Men and women rushed to help him, to carry him inside, to tend to his wounds. The human connection, forged in adversity, was palpable. Boril, the elder hunter, was exhausted, wounded, but his spirit intact. He had overcome the unthinkable, not by brute force, but by wisdom, love for his people, and ancestral memory. Borovoy, once again, had triumphed over the merciless winter, and Boril was living proof that human resilience was the strongest flame amidst the eternal ice. Anya's sincere embrace was the first balm for Boril's wounds. Her little arms squeezed him with pure love, and the elder felt a warm tear run down his face, mixing with the ice in his beard. Irina, with tear-filled eyes, helped him into the cabin, where the warmth of the fire felt like a miracle. Neighbors, with careful gestures, removed his frozen clothes, revealing skin marked by cold and scratches. A reverent silence filled the air as they tended to him, anointing his wounds with medicinal oils and covering him with warm furs. Gratitude was palpable, an invisible cloak that warmed more than the fire, filling Boril's chest with a momentary and precious peace. Anya sat beside the makeshift bed, holding her grandfather's wrinkled hand, her eyes fixed on him. Irina prepared a warm broth, the aroma of meat and herbs, a scent of life and hope. Boril drank slowly, feeling energy return, though weakly. He watched the faces of his people, the joy and exhaustion mingling with relief. The village had been saved, hunger averted. He had fulfilled his promise, and the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter, though the physical pain was a constant reminder. A tired but genuine smile lit his face, but the peace was short-lived. Hasty, breathless footsteps broke the night's quiet. Mikhail, the young sentinel, burst into the cabin, his face pale and eyes wide, not from fear of wolves, but of something new and terrifying. Boril, Irina, the reindeer, they are scattered. And the sky's changing. A storm, the worst I've ever seen, is coming from the north, too fast. His words fell like ice, freezing their joy. Boril's smile vanished, replaced by an expression of deep apprehension. The village felt hope drain away. Irina rushed to the window, and her heart froze. The stars, once sharp, were swallowed by a dark, menacing mass advancing frighteningly fast. The wind, once howling, now roared, bringing the first heavy snowflakes. The reindeer, though saved from the pack, were now scattered across the vast ice plains, exhausted by the chase and vulnerable to the extreme cold. If the storm reached them, they would be lost forever, frozen where they stood or buried under the snow. Boril's hard-won victory now seemed a mirage, a brief respite before a new ordeal. Boril tried to stand, but a sharp pain in his leg made him fall. Frustration burned in his chest, more intense than the ice. He had promised safety, and now a new threat, invisible and relentless, emerged. His eyes, once filled with weariness, now shone with renewed determination, but also with despair. How could he lead his people, wounded and exhausted, against the fury of nature itself? The image of the reindeer, the village's lifeblood, hung in the air. He felt the weight of his pain and the village's uncertain future. Anya, sensing the tension, squeezed her grandfather's hand. Irina, despite the shock, turned to the village, her eyes meeting the villagers at the door. Despair gave way to silent courage. They had seen Boril face the impossible. Now it was their turn. "We need to act. Now," Irina said, her voice firm, echoing her father's resilience. Boril, watching his daughter, felt a warmth in his chest. He was not alone. Together they would face the storm, searching for the reindeer before winter claimed them. The battle for Borovoy's survival was far from over. Irina, her voice firm despite the tremor of fear in her heart, cut through the icy air, echoing the resilience she had inherited from her father. "We need sleds, torches, ropes, quickly! Mikhail, gather the younger men. We need experienced guides. The wind is getting worse." Her determination was a beacon in the storm's growing darkness. The villagers, previously paralyzed, now moved with renewed purpose. The sight of Boril, wounded but alive, had rekindled the flame of hope, and Irina's voice gave them direction. Inside the cabin, Boril, his face pale and brow furrowed, tried to stand, but the sharp pain in his leg forced him back. He clenched his fists, frustration a bitter poison. "I need to go," he murmured, his voice hoarse. Anya, still holding his hand, looked at him with wide, worried eyes. "Grandpa, you're hurt. Irina will manage. She's strong, like you." The girl's words touched the elder's heart. He looked at Irina, who coordinated the preparations with impressive efficiency, her gestures quick and decisive. Yes, she was strong. The seed of his wisdom had germinated in her. Mikhail, his face still marked by initial panic, now displayed newfound courage. He gathered a group of young hunters, their faces serious. "We'll go in small groups," Irina instructed, her voice laden with authority. "One group to the north, one to the east, another to the south. The wind is coming from the north. So the reindeer might have gone south or east for shelter. Use torches, make noise. They will be scared and scattered." The plan was risky. The storm was already swallowing the moonlight, turning the world into a grey and white blur. Snow fell in thick flakes, and the wind promised to blind and freeze. Boril, lying down, closed his eyes, concentrating. He could feel the wind, the direction of the air currents, how the snow would accumulate. "Irina," he called, his voice stronger, "the reindeer will seek the natural shelter of the rocks to the east, near the small valley leading to the Lena River. That's where the wind is less cruel. But the ice there is treacherous. Beware of newly formed crevices." Irina nodded, absorbing every word. Her father's wisdom was a map, even if he couldn't go. She relayed the instructions to the groups, emphasizing caution. The village transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Sleds were loaded with blankets, emergency food, and torches. Older women prepared hot drinks for the hunters' return, while children huddled near the fire, their eyes wide, feeling the weight of the new threat. Anya, still beside Boril, squeezed his hand tighter. "Grandpa, what if they don't find the reindeer?" Boril opened his eyes, a glimmer of hope in them. "They will find them, my little one, because they are not alone. They are together. And that is the greatest strength we have against winter." Irina led the eastern group, the most promising one. The wind lashed her face and snow whipped her eyes, but she advanced with determination, feeling the weight of the village on her shoulders. Torches flickered, casting dancing shadows on the white, hostile landscape. The cold was excruciating, but the image of the reindeer, her people's lifeblood, drove her on. They called out, their shouts muffled by the storm's howl. With every meter, visibility decreased, and the ice beneath their feet whispered hidden dangers. The search was a race against time, against nature's relentless fury. The night advanced, and the darkness, combined with the blizzard, transformed the familiar into a deadly labyrinth. Irina knew every minute counted. Borovoy's resilience would be tested once more, not by hungry wolves, but by the very soul of winter, rising as the most formidable of adversaries. Irina advanced, each step a battle against the invisible fury of the wind. The cutting snow lashed her face, clinging to her eyelashes, making vision almost impossible. The torches, once beacons of hope, seemed mere flickering points, swallowed by the blinding darkness. She could feel the ice beneath her boots, slippery and treacherous, and with every gust, she feared a newly formed crevice would open beneath her feet, as her father had warned. Beside her, Mikhail and two other young hunters struggled, their faces contorted by cold and concentration. They stayed together by a rope, a fragile bond against the hostile immensity. "Further east!" Irina shouted, her voice almost inaudible against the wind's roar. "Near the rocks. Father said that's where they seek shelter." Mikhail nodded, pulling the rope to guide the group. His eyes scanned the landscape, but everything was an indistinct blur. Hope dwindled with every passing minute, replaced by growing despair. The reindeer, exhausted and frightened, could be anywhere, frozen or buried under the accumulating snow. In the cabin, Boril coughed, his chest aching, but his ears were attuned to the sounds outside. The storm's howl seemed crueler. Anya, nestled beside him, trembled, not just from cold, but from fear. "Grandpa, will they be okay?" she asked, her voice small. Boril squeezed her hand. "Irina is strong, my little one. She has the wisdom of the mountains and the courage of the river. She will find them." He tried to sound confident, but apprehension tightened his heart. He felt the pain of helplessness, wounded while his people faced such an ordeal. Back in the icy vastness, Irina felt an overwhelming weariness. Muscles burned, the cold penetrated every layer of clothing. For an instant, doubt invaded her. Would it be useless? Were the reindeer already lost? But the image of Anya's face, of her father's hopeful gaze, spurred her on. She could not give up. The village depended on her. "Careful," one of the hunters warned, pointing ahead. An irregular ice formation rose, a tangle of frozen peaks and valleys, exactly as Boril had described. It was a sign they were on the right path, but also a reminder of the danger. The wind, as it passed, created a ghostly sound, like ancient laments. Irina approached, her torch raised. The ice there was even more treacherous, with deep cracks and thin bridges over invisible abysses. She remembered her father's lessons on how to read the ice, how to feel its strengths and weaknesses. Cautiously, she tested the ground with the tip of her foot, seeking firmness. Suddenly, a faint sound, almost muffled by the wind, reached her ears. It was not the storm's howl, nor the lament of the ice. It was a bleat, faint, distant but unmistakable. "Stop!" Irina whispered, raising her hand. The group stopped, their hearts pounding. "Did you hear that?" Mikhail, his eyes wide, nodded. "Yes, I heard it. Over there." He pointed to a dark crevice between two large ice formations. A wave of adrenaline surged through Irina. The reindeer! They were there, or at least some of them. Hope, which seemed to have faded, rekindled with overwhelming intensity in her chest. But the crevice seemed too dangerous, an invitation to the icy abyss. The path would be arduous, and time, a relentless enemy with every step. The battle to rescue the herd was just beginning, while the storm, far from abating, intensified its relentless fury over the white vastness. The night would be long and full of unexpected dangers. Irina felt her heart pound, a mix of hope and terror chilling her veins. The faint bleat, almost inaudible, was proof they weren't alone. But the dark crevice ahead seemed a portal to the unknown. "Careful," she warned, raising her torch, whose yellowish light barely penetrated the abyss's darkness. The wind howled with renewed fury, throwing heavy snowflakes that felt like needles against their faces. Mikhail, with the rope stretched between them, tested the ice with his boot, the sound hollow and worrying. "It seems unstable, Irina, and the crevice is deep." She knelt, feeling the ice vibrate beneath her gloved hands. She remembered her father's words, the ancestral wisdom about the language of ice. "We cannot retreat. The reindeer are there. We need a longer rope. Mikhail, you and Sergei tie yourselves together. I'll go first." The determination in her voice was unshakable, an echo of Boral's courage. The young hunters, though apprehensive, nodded, trusting their leader. With extreme care, Irina descended into the crevice, using the natural cracks in the ice as footholds, her torch flickering, revealing the smooth, icy walls. The cold there was even more intense, a deadly embrace that stole her breath. At the bottom of the crevice, protected by an ice ledge, they were 3 reindeer, a mother and 2 calves, huddled, trembling. Their large, dark eyes reflected terror, but also a thread of hope at the sight of the torchlight. They were exhausted, malnourished, but alive. Irina felt a wave of relief so strong it almost made her cry. "They're here!" she shouted upwards, her voice choked with emotion and cold. 3, they're alive!" Above, Mikhail and Sergei let out a collective sigh of relief, but the joy was short-lived. How to get them out? The crevice was narrow, and the reindeer, though small, were heavy and frightened. Irina tried to calm them with soft murmurs, extending a hand to the mother reindeer. The animal, hesitant, sniffed her palm, a gesture of trust that warmed the hunter's heart. In the cabin, Boral coughed, his chest burning. Anya, asleep beside him, seemed so small and fragile. He felt the storm's fury shake the cabin, every gust of wind a blow to his heart. "Irina," he murmured, his voice hoarse. Helplessness was a heavy burden. He wanted to be there, guiding, protecting, but the image of Irina, firm and decisive, leading the men, brought unexpected comfort. She was the extension of his strength, the guardian of the future. Back in the crevice, Irina carefully tied a rope around the mother reindeer, which resisted with a frightened bleat. "We need to be quick," she told the hunters above, her voice tense. "The ice won't hold much longer." With a combined effort, they began to pull. The reindeer slipped, its hind legs struggling against the smooth ice. The frightened calves tried to follow, but the crevice was treacherous. One of the calves slipped, falling into a deeper crack, its bleat echoing in despair. Irina felt panic. Time was running out, and the storm was intensifying, threatening to swallow them all. The hope of saving the entire herd seemed a distant dream. Irina felt panic chill her veins, but she did not yield. The image of the reindeer calf, bleating desperately in the deep crack, ignited a protective fury. "Mikhail, Sergei, more rope, quickly!" Her tense voice spurred the young men on. The wind howled, mocking them. The snow, a dense curtain, threatened to swallow them. Irina looked into the abyss, calculating. The crack was narrow, too deep to reach without risk. She remembered her father, his lessons on patience and observation. The ice had weak and strong points. One had to feel them. With a firm knot around her waist, Irina instructed Mikhail to hold the rope tightly, while Sergei helped the mother reindeer. Slowly, she leaned over the crevice, her torch flickering, revealing the huddled calf, its large, dark eyes fixed on her with fear and pleading. "Calm, my little one," she murmured, her voice a whisper against the storm's roar. She reached out, but it was too far. With every movement, the ice groaned, a sinister sound echoing the danger. In the cabin, Borrell felt every gust of wind like a blow. Anya awakened, hugged him. "Grandpa, the wind is angry," she said. Borrell stroked his granddaughter's hair, his eyes fixed on the door, imagining Irina out there. He could almost feel the ice beneath her feet, the tension, the weight of responsibility. A sharp pain shot through his leg, but the pain for his daughter was more acute. "She is strong, Anya, stronger than she thinks," he whispered, trying to convince himself. Helplessness was a burden, but faith in Irina, the seed of his resilience, was a comfort. Back at the crevice, Irina realized a direct approach was impossible. She needed a plan. Her eyes swept the ice walls, searching for a ledge, an embedded rock, any support. The wind almost tore the torch from her grasp, but she held it firm. Suddenly a thought. The air currents, the same ones that formed the crevices, also created small platforms of compacted snow and ice. If she could reach one of them. "Mikhail, more rope!" she shouted, pointing to an irregular formation below. Carefully she propelled herself, using the strength of her arms and legs to move sideways, her body scraping against the rough ice. Every movement was a risk, a test for the rope and her courage. The calf bleated louder, sensing the proximity of help. Finally, she reached the precarious but sufficient platform. She crouched, her heart pounding, and reached out again. This time, her fingers touched the calf's soft fur. Gently, she pulled it close, nestling it against her chest, protecting it from the wind. "I got it!" she shouted, her voice full of triumph and relief. Mikhail and Sergei cheered, and the mother reindeer seemed calmer. But the journey wasn't over. Getting the calf out of the crevice, and then the mother and the other calf, would be an even greater challenge, with the storm intensifying. Irina looked at the sky, where the blizzard was growing denser. A white veil threatening to hide the world. The victory was only partial, and the fight for the herds and the village's survival was far from over. The cold bit, but the flame of hope in her chest burned stronger than ever. Irina felt the relief drain away as quickly as it had filled her. The calf, nestled in her arms, trembled but was safe. However, the mother reindeer and the other calf were still in the crevice, and the storm, relentless, seemed to gain strength with every passing second. The wind howled like a furious ancestral spirit, and the snow, now an impenetrable curtain, blinded them. "Mikhail, Sergei, we need more rope. The mother reindeer is heavy, and the ice is giving way." Irina's voice barely reached the ears of the young hunters above, who struggled to hold their position, their faces marked by effort and cold. Above, Mikhail and Sergei, their gloved hands already numb, pulled and tied the rope with all the strength they had left. The fear that the ice would give way beneath their feet was constant, a shiver that didn't come from the cold. They knew that Irina's and the reindeer's lives depended on their steadfastness. "We're pulling, Irina! Hold on tight!" Mikhail shouted, his voice hoarse. Irina, with the calf secure in one arm, used the other to guide the rope around the mother reindeer. The animal, exhausted and frightened, whinnied, resisting. "Calm, my friend, calm. It's for your safety," Irina whispered. Her own voice choked with exhaustion. With each pull, the ice groaned, and small splinters broke off, falling into the abyss. She could feel the vibration, the fragility of that icy prison. In the cabin, Boril, with his eyes closed, felt the storm in his soul. Anya, snuggled close, asked, "Grandpa, is Mommy okay?" Boril opened his eyes, a glimmer of concern in them. "She is fighting, my little one, fighting for all of us." He imagined Irina, every movement, every decision. The pain in his leg was a constant reminder of his helplessness, but faith in his daughter was a balm. He murmured ancient prayers, asking for strength and protection from the spirits of winter. Back in the crevice, the second calf, seeing its mother being pulled, began to bleat desperately, trying to climb the smooth walls. Irina realized she couldn't pull both the mother and the calf at the same time. It was an impossible choice. If she waited, the ice might give way. If she tried one at a time, the other might fall even deeper or freeze. Her eyes swept the surroundings, searching for a solution. It was then that she saw it, a small ice ledge, almost imperceptible, a little above the calf. It was risky, but perhaps... "Mikhail, release the rope from the mother reindeer for a moment. I'm going to try to get the other calf," Irina shouted, her voice cutting through the wind's howl. Mikhail hesitated, but his trust in Irina was greater than his fear. Carefully, he loosened the rope, keeping it ready to pull again. Irina, with the first calf still in her arms, propelled herself with a strength she didn't know she possessed. Her muscles burned, but the image of Anya's face, of her father's gaze, drove her on. She grabbed the ledge, her gloved fingers slipping, but finding purchase. With a quick and desperate movement, she reached the second calf, which clung to her with surprising strength. The ice cracked beneath her feet. "Now! Pull the mother reindeer!" Irina shouted, her voice hoarse. Mikhail and Sergei, with a Herculean effort, pulled the rope. The mother reindeer, with Irina's help pushing from below, slipped and climbed, finally reaching the edge of the crevice, exhausted but alive. A collective sigh of relief escaped the hunters. Irina, with the two calves nestled, felt the weight of victory, but getting herself and the calves out of the crevice with the unstable ice was the next challenge. "Mikhail, the rope for me, and the calves, carefully." With every inch, the danger was palpable. Finally, with aching arms and a body trembling from cold and exhaustion, Irina was pulled out of the crevice, the calves safe in her arms. Snow continued to fall, but the wind's fury seemed, for a brief moment, to have lessened, as if nature itself acknowledged the feat. 3 lives saved. But the night was long, and the vast icy plain still hid hundreds of reindeer. The battle was far from over, but a small victory warmed their exhausted hearts. Irina, with the reindeer calves nestled in her arms, felt her body protest, but her heart pulsed with new energy. The small victory, a breath of hope, was the fuel they needed. "Let's go," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "We need to find the rest. The wind is calming. It's our chance." And indeed, winter's fury seemed to have lessened. The blizzard, once an impenetrable veil, now transformed into a fine drizzle of flakes, allowing the pale moonlight, hidden for hours, to begin to peek through the sparse clouds. Mikhail and Sergei, invigorated by the sight of the saved reindeer, helped Irina tie the calves and the mother reindeer, exhausted but alive, to the sleds. They moved forward, their eyes scanning the landscape which, little by little, revealed itself to be less hostile. Irina, Remembering her father's words about reindeer seeking natural shelter, began to look for signs, for tracks, for any indication that would lead her to the heart of the herd. In the cabin, Boril felt the change in the air. The wind's howl had diminished, and a heavy but hopeful silence filled the space. Anya, still asleep, seemed more peaceful. He closed his eyes, concentrating, trying to feel what Irina would be feeling, where the spirits of winter would be guiding her. A clear image emerged in his mind, the large valley to the east, with its rocky formations that offered protection against the most severe winds. He knew that Irina, with her keen intuition, would be on the right path. Back in the white vastness, Irina spotted them first. A dark, vast shadow against the snow. Hundreds of reindeer huddled in a valley protected by imposing rocks, exactly as her father had predicted. They were exhausted, some wounded by the harsh weather, but most were alive. A cry of triumph escaped her lips, echoing in the settling silence. Mikhail and Sergei beside her let out shouts of joy. The other groups of hunters, guided by the same instincts and Boril's instructions, also began to converge. The weak, bluish light of dawn began to paint the horizon, revealing the extent of the herd. The task now was to gather the scattered animals and guide them back to the village. It wouldn't be easy. The reindeer were frightened and disoriented, but the presence of the hunters, Irina's calm voice, and the familiar scent of their own sled animals began to calm them. With patience and persistence, the hunters formed a large semicircle, slowly guiding the herd westward. Irina led, her heart overflowing with gratitude and relief. With every step, she felt the weight of responsibility lessen, replaced by the certainty of victory. The village, still asleep, would soon awaken to the sight of its salvation. As the first rays of sun touched the mountaintops, the reindeer herd, a brown and white mass, began to emerge from the icy mist, approaching Borovoy. The villagers, awakened by the noise and the barking of dogs, came out of their cabins, their faces marked by the night's apprehension, but now illuminated by hope. Boril, supported by Anya, limped to his cabin door. His eyes, once filled with worry, now shone with tears of pride as he saw Irina, exhausted but triumphant, leading the herd. She had overcome not only the storm's fury, but also the burden of doubt and fear. The entire village erupted in applause and shouts of joy. Women rushed with blankets and hot drinks, while men helped guide the reindeer into the corrals. Irina, seeing her father, ran to him, hugging him tightly. "We did it, father, we did it!" Boril held her close, feeling his daughter's strength and resilience. "You did it, my girl. You are the strength of Borovoy." The connection between them, forged in adversity, was unbreakable. The village, though marked by the ordeal, was saved. Human resilience, love for community, and ancestral wisdom had triumphed once again over the relentless vastness of the YAKUT winter. Life in Borovoy would continue, stronger and more united than ever. The embrace between Irina and Boril, there, under the pale dawn sun, was more than a reunion. It was the fusion of two generations, of ancestral wisdom and renewed courage. The tears that streamed down the elder's wrinkled face were not just of relief, but of a deep pride that warmed his soul. Boril held her close with the strength he had left, feeling the vibration of life in his daughter, the future of his people. Irina closed her eyes for an instant, absorbing that moment, exhaustion mingling with the sweetness of victory. The smell of smoke and snow on her clothes, the warmth of her father's body. The entire village buzzed with contagious energy. Children, with their curious, sleepy eyes, watched the reindeer being guided into the corrals, a spectacle of life and movement that chased away the night's shadows. The barking of dogs, once alert and tense, was now pure euphoria. The women, with their soft voices and maternal gestures, offered hot tea and pieces of bread to the hunters, whose faces, once tense and marked by the cold, now displayed tired, satisfied smiles. Mikhail and Sergei, their shoulders stooped from effort, but their eyes shining with the flame of triumph, helped tie the sleds, exchanging glances of complicity and respect with Irina. They had faced the icy hell alongside her, and together had prevailed against the most overwhelming odds. In Boril's cabin later, while Anya slept soundly, nestled in her fur bed, Irina massaged her aching temples. The silence, once oppressive and heavy with anxiety, was now a balm, filled only by the soft crackle of the fire. Boril, sitting near the fire, watched his daughter with an affection that transcended words, a glimmer of admiration in his gaze. "You were more than I expected, my girl," he said, his voice hoarse but firm, each syllable laden with meaning. "You showed all of us that Borovoy's strength lies not just in our arms, but in the unity of our hearts and unwavering faith in each other." Irina smiled, a smile that reached her eyes, but carried the weight of the night and the lightness of a burden that had finally been lifted. "I only followed your teachings, Father. The wisdom of our ancestors guided us through the darkness." In the days that followed, the village dedicated itself to healing its wounds, not just physical, but those of the soul. The reindeer, fed and sheltered in the corrals, slowly recovered, their soft bleats filling the air with the promise of continuity. The hunters, including Irina, took turns caring for them, their calm voices and gentle gestures strengthening the bonds with the animals that were the very life of the community. Boril, though still limping, dedicated himself to sharing his stories and knowledge with the younger ones, teaching them to read the signs of winter, to respect nature, and to trust each other as a single family. Anya, with the innocence of childhood, played with the reindeer calves, oblivious to the gravity of the danger they had faced, but feeling the joy and unity that permeated the air, like an invisible embrace. Irina, in turn, felt a deep and irreversible transformation. The doubt that had haunted her for so long, the feeling of not being worthy of her father's legacy, had vanished like mist in the sun. In its place, an unshakable certainty blossomed. She was the guardian of Borovoy, the living bridge between past and future, the voice that would echo ancestral wisdom. Her eyes, once often thoughtful and laden with uncertainty, now carried the light of leadership, of responsibility accepted with serene grace. She spent hours with Boril, absorbing every word, every piece of advice, every legend told about the spirits of winter and the strength of the YAKUT people. The connection between them deepened, no longer just father and daughter, but master and apprentice, two pillars that together supported the community. The memory of the 800 wolves, the overwhelming storm, and the treacherous glaciers would remain as an invisible scar, a constant reminder of life's fragility and nature's relentless force. But it would also be a story, told and retold around the campfires, of how little Borovoy, with its united and courageous people, had faced the impossible and triumphed. The village now looked to the future with renewed hope and unwavering faith, knowing that no matter how relentless winter might be, human resilience, forged in the heart of Yakutia, would always find a way. Life continued, in an eternal cycle of challenges and victories, of love and connection, under Borovoy's vast and icy sky, stronger and more united than ever, a vibrant testament to the indomitable human soul. Months passed since the terrible ordeal, and Borovoy's icy vastness, still covered by a white mantle, whispered promises of a new cycle. Spring, slow and hesitant, lurked on the horizon, bringing a faint warmth and the hope of longer days. The village, united to face winter's fury and the threat of the 800 wolves, now blossomed with deep resilience, an unbreakable bond forged in adversity. Irina, sitting at her cabin door, watched Anya play with the reindeer calves rescued from the crevice. The small animals, now strong and curious, frolicked in the snow, living testimony to victory and the continuity of life. The smile on Irina's lips was serene, but her eyes carried the depth of one who had faced the abyss and found inner light. She was no longer just the hunter, Boril's daughter. She was the leader, the guardian, the voice of Borovoy's future. Her posture was erect, her gestures, once hesitant, now firm and decisive, conveying silent confidence. Boril, beside her, his leg now stronger, but feeling the weight of age in every movement, stroked the head of one of the sled dogs. His eyes, once fixed on the horizon in search of danger, now contemplated the village with a peace that only the wisdom of years and the acceptance of destiny could bring. "They've grown, haven't they, my girl?" he said, his voice soft, pointing to the reindeer calves. "Just like you, stronger, wiser, with souls tempered by the cold." Irina nodded, taking her father's wrinkled hand and squeezing it affectionately. The connection between them, once a tenuous thread, had become an unbreakable anchor, forged in the fire of adversity and the sharing of responsibility. The village, in turn, had transformed. The cabins, once silent and apprehensive, now echoed with laughter and songs, filled with a vibrant community spirit. Men and women worked together on repairing the corrals, preparing for spring fishing, contributing with a renewed sense of purpose and unity. Mikhail and Sergei, the young hunters who had accompanied Irina into the crevice, were now regarded with a respect that transcended age. They had learned that true strength lay not just in muscles, but in the courage to face fear and unconditional loyalty to the community. Their gazes towards Irina were of admiration and silent reverence, an acknowledgement of her bravery. The stories of that night, of the storm and the crevice, were told and retold around the campfires, not as tales of terror, but as legends of overcoming adversity and collective heroism. The memory of the 800 wolves, though still causing a shiver, was now a reminder of what they had conquered, of the strength that resided in their hearts and the unity of their spirits. The challenges of the YAKUT winter would remain, relentless and eternal, but the village of Borovoye had found a new way to face them, together as an inseparable family. Irina, at the end of a long day, looked up at the starry sky where the aurora borealis danced in shades of green and blue, a spectacle of pure magic and renewed hope. She felt the biting cold, but in her chest a warm flame burned, the flame of hope and responsibility accepted with serenity. Life in Borovoye was a continuous cycle of struggle and peace, of losses and rebirths, and she, Irina, was ready to guide her people through each season, honoring the memory of her ancestors and building a future of unity and resilience. The village, under the vast YAKUT sky, was a beacon of light, a vibrant testament that the human spirit, united by love and faith, can triumph over the most overwhelming odds eternally.